Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for the brave ones who connected for a session about document management on a Friday afternoon. So thank you very much. My name is Sébastien Paulet, and we will be together during 45 minutes to talk about document management in Office 365. First, a big thank you to the organization team and everyone from the orga team, and also for our sponsors, which without them we won't be able to organize such an event. Few words, as I don't come from New Zealand nor Australia, so but I would like to pay my respect to elder past, present, and future. Quick version of the conduct of the code of conduct. You participate to a public event. You can ask your question. You have a Q&A section in Teams. A little button with a question mark. So please, if you have any question, feel free to ask. I will take them at the end of the event, and please be kind and respectful with everyone. And few things about my name is Sébastien Paulet. I'm a Microsoft MVP. I come from France, and I live now in New Caledonia, this little island close between Australia and New Zealand. And I work on Microsoft technologies since, for 15 years, mainly on SharePoint topics, document management, records management, compliance, IT security, and in project management. Okay. So what's our topic today? So to go directly to the topic. We're going to talk about document management, business document management. And to begin with this, just check this. Look at the last 50 years on document management. 50 years ago, everything in companies was managed using paper sheet, and everything was typed. Okay. 40 years ago was the beginning of folder, subfolder. The IT began, and we had shared folders with folder, subfolder, and document glossary, and so on. During the 90s is the beginning of document management system. This is when we had the great idea to begin to use a rational database to classify documents. And 20 years ago was the beginning of collaboration, and it's also the beginning of SharePoint on premise, but the beginning of SharePoint and collaboration. And 10 years ago, the buzzword was social network. Everything was about social enterprise network and so on. It was also the golden age for Yammer. And now this is totally the golden age of Teams. And I think we can say that now it's the golden age of digital workspace. Okay, so you can see that every 10 years we have like a new step on the way we share the information and about the tools we use to share information. And we're going to focus on the new ones. Okay. During this session, I will talk about business cases. Okay. How do we manage? How do we use those? I will also do a focus on SharePoint, because when we talk about documents in Office 365, it's always about SharePoint. I will explain why after. And so I will do a focus on SharePoint in comparison with other document management systems like Documentum, FileNet, or any other ones. We will focus also on the way the documents are stored. When we say it's stored in SharePoint, where are the documents? How are they stored? What is the encryption mechanism and so on? And we talk about compliance also, and about the laws which apply to our document when we store them in Microsoft Cloud. It's quite a wide topic, so I will try to be synthetic and not so much boring for a Friday afternoon. So, the first question, we will begin with the easy part, is which tool to use when you need to share a document. Okay, if you open Office 365, you will see that you can have documents in several tools. You can add a file as an attached file in Outlook. You can store a file in SharePoint, but you can also store a file in OneDrive. But I can also use Yammer to share a document. Or I can, in fact, also use Planner to share a document. And of course, we can also use Teams. Okay, so as a end user, if you just give me Office 365 and I open Office 365, I need to understand which tool to use when I need to share a document. Okay. And based on my experience, when you need to share a document, which tool you should use to share a document? The good question, the first question he should have is what is my target? Who has the person I want to share with to share my document? Okay. What is my target? For instance, if I say, okay, I want to share my document with everybody around the whole planet. Okay, the proper tool is definitely a website. And if I don't have Office 365, I will build a website. Okay. I want to share my document with everybody within my company. The dedicated tool for such a use case is what we call an intranet. And if I don't have Office 365, if I'm in an old school company, I probably will see a whole shared drive with just one folder called public, and which is shared with everybody inside the company. Okay. You see this range column. In fact, I will explain everything for a whole company in this column, and then I will explain everything for with Office 365. But let's begin with the dark picture. Okay. So to go on, no, I want to share my document, but not with everybody. It's just for a specific use case, and it's for a formal use case. What I mean is, if you have a clear process, for instance, you have a quality system, okay, and you need to share quality documents. So if you know about quality management, you know that each document has a type. It can be a processes or procedure, or notes, or a guide, or see you have a clear classification, and every document is attached to a specific process and so on. Okay, this is typically where we call about document management system. And if you don't have Office 365, if you don't have a great tool, you probably use your shared drive. Okay, and within this kind of use case, for DMS, it's really easy to spot this kind of use case, because you will find folders and subfolders with a specific classification, and every folder and subfolder will follow the same glossary, same naming conventions, and so on. Okay. Other use case, no, I need to share my document with few people or many people inside the company, but not the whole company, for more informal process. Okay, for instance, for project management. Okay, it's clear that I was talking about DMS, and DMS I was using the example of document management system. It's really clear, very straight, very square, and so on. But if I need something more informal, and project management is typically something very informal, this is where we will talk about collaboration. Okay, and here, for instance, we will have a folder per project, and everyone within his project folder will do whatever they want. Okay, because it's impossible to have the same exact classification for every project. You have big project, you have little projects, so don't try to have a single classification for all projects. You won't have it. So collaboration, and sometimes you want to share your documents with people who are outside your organization, and this is where we talk about extranets. And when you want to, if you don't have an extranet, because I'm not in any company and it's quite expensive to build an extranet, I was using my mailbox, I was using Outlook, and I was sending the document as attached file, which, as we all know, is never a good solution to share a document. I mean, never. There are very, very, very few cases where it can be interesting, but by default, we would say that it's mostly a good way to mix between the last version of document and so on, and it increases the size. It's not good. Talking about all the documents I have mentioning, I mean, all those documents, the document public, the one from the intranet, one from the document management system, and so on, all those documents, I need to keep a track of them. I need to keep records, okay? Because even when they are not useful, I may have to keep the document for legal purpose, okay? This is typically where we talk about records management. And when you don't have a record system, it's typically when you create just a subfolder called records or archive or old, okay, in your shared drive. And the last kind of document we have are individual documents. The one I don't want to share with other people within the company. It may be my drafts, it may be document I want to share, but with very little people. It can be a confidential document. Anyway, I don't want to put this document in my collaborative tool or into my document management system or in my intranet, because it's something very specific. And right now, for confidentiality reason or because it's just a draft, I don't want to share it. I don't want this document to enter within the process. Okay, and if I have nothing else, I will probably store this document directly on my desktop. Okay, directly in my computer. Good. So saying so, this is a picture of a company, and maybe for you may think there is no more company like that. In fact, nearly every week I meet a new company which is still using shared drives and so on. Okay, so if now I need to migrate this company to Office 365, or if I have new end users which discover Office 365, what should I explain? What should I explain them? I should explain that for website, Office 365 is not a solution. A few years ago, Microsoft was talking about using Office 365 to build website. It's no more an option. It's totally deprecated. In fact, you have no more the capability to do it. Okay, so website remain website. But if you need to build an intranet, SharePoint is a good solution. Okay, and it remains the good solution. So quick focus on SharePoint. If I want to use SharePoint as an intranet, What you can see on the right is a screen capture of a SharePoint page, an intranet, a sample Contoso intranet built on SharePoint. This is a pure out-of-the-box modern SharePoint you see here. There is no development, no code, no .NET, no JavaScript, no CSS, nothing like that. It's just pure SharePoint out of the box. And for many companies, it's sufficient. What we need when we build an intranet is to have a clear design, something really handy and easy to read. Okay, so a lot of space, something I can easily read directly from a laptop or directly from my mobile phone. And this is why also now when we talk about intranet, we have to do it in responsive design. If I see my intranet from a web browser, and I also need to have an app, a mobile app, to read my intranet from my mobile phone. Okay, this is everything that SharePoint can give you. Okay, if your company says, okay, I want something in Office 365, but SharePoint design is not my cup of tea, I don't want it. Okay, I want something more specific, something which looks like more a website, and I want my specific design. Using specific development is not a good idea, definitely, from my experience. So have a look to solutions like Valo Intranet, like Powell, which are sponsors of our event, but and which are good solutions, in fact. And using those solutions, you will be able to brand the whole SharePoint page and to make your own design for your intranet. Okay. If you don't want to pay for such a solution and you want to use SharePoint out of the box, have a look to lookbook.microsoft.com. This is a website built by Microsoft where you will find plenty of SharePoint design. And if one of them, if you like one of them, you can directly click on a button and authenticate. And doing so, it will create a site collection within your tenant. We directly set up as you can see it in lookbook.microsoft.com. Okay, so you don't have to set up the design by yourself. You can directly import it from Microsoft website, which is very efficient. It saves a lot of time. Okay, so you can use SharePoint as an intranet to share your document with everybody. Like, I mean, HR document, your IT security policy, whatever. This is typically the kind of document you will find in an intranet. If you need to build a document management system, I was talking, for instance, about quality management system. SharePoint remains a good option also. You may use, instead of using modern communication sites, the one I was showing just before, you may use a modern team site, like I'm showing to you right now. And if you look at this, for instance, this is a sample, a real POC I made for one of my customers in France, and this is a document management system, a quality document management system. And so the first thing you see when you land on the quality document management system is a map of all the processes. And if you click on one of the processes, you will see the list of the document attached to this process. Okay, and as you can see, I mean, this is something this is typically the kind of design we expect from a document management system. We see our list of documents, we see the version number, we see the document type, the process, the manager, the author, the validation date, and so on. You can also have a document ID. Okay, all those kind of information I expect to find when I go on a document management system. Talking about document management system, this is a good opportunity to do a focus on why it's a good idea, it's a good point to use SharePoint as a document management system. You may have your end users which are currently using shared folders, and they complain about shared folders, but they are reluctant to change their habits. Okay, they want something better, but they want something also which do the same as their shared folders. So you need to explain them what are the benefits of using SharePoint. Okay, and what are the main benefits of using the tool search as SharePoint? First one, search engine. You have an excellent search engine in Office 365 and SharePoint. You have a search box on the top left corner, and within this search box you can type what you are looking for, one or several words. It will directly search within document name, document properties, and also document content, and it will directly show you the results. Okay, it's really handy, and you have to explain them that, for instance, if they continue to use a shared drive, when you search something like that in a shared drive, you type your search request, you have the time to go for your cup of tea, to smoke a cig, and come back, and maybe you will have results. Okay, this is when you use a shared drive. But when you use SharePoint, it's immediate. You are typing, and the results are displaying at the same time. Okay, so it will be very, very more handy for them handier for them to use SharePoint to search document. First point, search. Second point, version history. Every time you modify a document in SharePoint, it creates a new versions. You can retrieve this version history. You can see when the document has been modified, who has modified the document, and if you click on the date and time, it will open the document as it was at that moment. Okay, so you keep track. Doing so, you keep track of all modifications which have been done on the document, and it's really important when we talk about collaboration. If you are still using a shared drive, end user, what you can see on the shared drive is that Department A don't want to share their document with Department B. And when you ask them why they don't want to share their document with the other department, they will say that, yes, but it's in case someone modified my document, and if they do a mistake, I don't want them to do modification within my documents. Okay. And with a system as SharePoint, you can begin to open the gates. You can allow the other department to be able to modify my own documents, because sometimes they need to do so. And I can begin to have collaboration with my colleagues from other departments. Why I can do so? Because I keep track of all the modifications. So if someone do a mistake, you can go to the version history of the document, retrieve who has done the modification, ask them why they have done such a modification, because maybe they have a good reason to do so. And you can also roll back the modifications. Okay, you can restore the document as it was a few versions ago. Okay, so very important version history. Third point, co-editions. Co-editing is also a big feature on SharePoint. You can be several people at the same time on the same document, up to 10 people on the same document collaborating. Okay, if you are working on big documents, like for instance, a request for proposal. Okay, request for proposal, you need to, it's most of the time, those are big documents, like for 40, 50 pages. Okay, and most of the time it's also something which is written with people from legal department, people from IT department, and people from business department. So I may have something like 3 people working on the same document. And if I'm still using shared drives, I have 2 solutions. Or the legal one is waiting for the IT one to hand his contribution before he can begin to work on the document, so I'm losing time, okay? Or the legal one will do his part at the same time as the IT guy, so they will do a copy of the document. And doing so, you will have several last versions of the document. And so you need a victim in a way to merge all the versions of the document, and definitely not a good option. Okay, so doing so, instead of losing time and merging document and so on, okay, you just go on the document, you click on it, and you can directly type whatever you want, wherever you want. Exception, you cannot edit the same paragraph as the other user, but I mean, usually those are different chapters you need to collaborate on. Last big feature for me using a tool like SharePoint is that you can synchronize your document with your laptop or your mobile phone. And doing so, it's really important. It means that, for instance, if I'm a salespeople, I'm a sales employee, I mean, I can go outside, I can go directly to see my client, and even if I'm offline, I don't have any internet connection, I can still have the last version of the document on my computer. Okay. If I don't have such a tool, if I'm still using shared drives, it means that I have to copy the document on my desktop or whatever, and it means that if someone made an update on the shared drive, I don't have the update on my desktop. So doing so, I'm sure to have the last version when I'm working on the documents. Very important. Okay. So we were talking about SharePoint for intranet and SharePoint for document management system. Now, if I need to do collaboration, the good tool, if I need to do project management, for instance, and so on, the good tool for that is definitely Teams. Since few weeks, you may have discovered Teams. Maybe you were not using Teams before, but now everybody knows Teams because during the lockdown we had to use a video conference system. Okay, and Teams is known now mostly for video conference and to do conference like this one, for instance. But a few months ago, when I was meeting customers, I was talking about video conference, of course, but I was mostly talking about collaboration. And Teams is a collaboration tool, not for video, but for the ability to have one place to have all this information about, for instance, a specific project. A good pattern in Teams is to create one team per project, for instance. And in the publication tab, I will have all the discussion about the project, so I will stop sending emails about this project. I will use Teams to have discussion about the project. I will put my files in the file tab. Okay, great for my documents. And I can also add other tabs which are linked to my other project by GitHub or whatever you want. Okay. So Teams as a collaboration tool. Then as an extranet, okay. Before I had to send my documents as attached files. Now what I can do is to use SharePoint or Teams, in fact. Okay, all the tools I have in Office 365, I can use them to share with external people. And there is no extra cost for that. Okay, I can share with someone who is external to of my company. So the only thing I have to do is to be sure that my IT has enabled the option to share with external. You can manage this by site collection for SharePoint or by Teams in Teams. Okay, no additional license cost, and you have several options to share with external. So no more extranet, in fact. What was an extranet is just no SharePoint set collection or a Teams dedicated to my client or dedicated to this project, and I need to invite my IT partner, for instance, to work directly within this team, and they can do it remotely. Okay. For records management, tricky one. This one is a tricky one. So, in fact, SharePoint is compliant with the ISO 15486 norm, which is a norm for records management. Okay, and I know that in US this is in fact this is a norm from the US, so this is a norm they use. No big deal about that. But you may work on healthcare system, for instance, or in banking system, or in another country, and maybe this American norm, ISO, even if it's an international norm, but maybe your country or your industry has another norm, okay? And so you need to take care about the fact that is SharePoint compliant with this norm. I will talk about norms a little bit further after, but okay. So check that SharePoint is compliant with the norm you have to be compliant with. If SharePoint is compliant, great. If not, you may have to add a record management system, another one plugged with SharePoint, which will, by a tiny workflow, send directly the document to the records management system. Okay. And then, ultimate one, for the individual files, you will use OneDrive. Okay. OneDrive, the only use case when you need to use OneDrive is when you don't have to share this document within the process, with everybody within the company, and so on. Okay. So, based on this picture, what can be the conclusions we have? I have two main conclusions. First one, when you meet someone, we say, okay, we will migrate our shared drives in Office 365, and they say, okay, this is a single project, and we will move everything in OneDrive, or everything in SharePoint, or everything in Teams. You have to explain them to slow down. Okay, migrating a shared drive to Office 365 is not one project. Those are several projects. You will have to build an intranet, you will have to build document management system, and you may have to build also collaboration spaces. Okay, and maybe also you need a records management system. So those are several projects. Second conclusion, OneDrive should be only used for very specific use cases. So when you deploy Office 365, emphasize the use case of SharePoint and Teams, because those are the most important use cases. Okay, and keep OneDrive for after. Okay, you first need to explain people how to use the tool which will be useful to share with other people instead of individual tool like OneDrive. If you put OneDrive first and you don't deploy SharePoint and Teams, you will see that the end user will move all their documents within OneDrive, and after you will have to work very hard to explain them that finally, okay, you moved everything in OneDrive, but now you need to move it in SharePoint or Teams and so on. So be careful in the deployment order for your tools in Office 365. Okay. Okay, done for OneDrive for business. Then using using SharePoint as a document management system. I need to go faster. I'm a little bit late. What you have to understand is that Office 365, when you talk about Teams, about Planner, or about Yammer, behind the scene, there is always an artifact called Office 365 Group. Okay, and behind an Office 365 group or behind OneDrive, storing the document, it's always SharePoint. So even if you don't see SharePoint for all those tools, there is always SharePoint storing the documents. Okay. So when we talk about document management in Office 365, it's always about talking about SharePoint Online. And here what you see is a grid I use to compare SharePoint with other document management system like LiveLink, Documentum, or Alfresco, for instance. Okay. So what are the criteria? First one, storage. Is SharePoint a good tool to store documents? Yes, but you need to take care. You need to take care because, and I did a mistake, yes, sorry. You need to take care because there are limitations in SharePoint, okay? Few ones you need to know. Don't put more than 5,000 documents within a single flat folder. And don't try to break inheritance to have more than 5,000 security scope per document library. If you do something like that, it will slow down, you will begin to have errors and so on. So don't do something like that. Okay. And if you still use SharePoint on-premise, you will have limitation by site collection on the size of site collections. Okay, so for storage, yes, you can store gigabytes, terabytes of documents in SharePoint, but you need to take care when you do a big project, a big document management project in SharePoint about those limitations. Okay. Can we highlight a document? Yes, we can bind a document. Can we classify a document? Yes, we can use metadata and so on. Can we have permissions on document? Yes, but as I said before, be careful. You shouldn't break inheritance. Breaking inheritance is setting specific permissions on a single document on more than 5,000 documents in a single document library. If you do something like that, if you go over the 5,000 limit, it will begin to be slow to open documents, to go through your folders. It will be slow also to index the documents. And if you go beyond 50,000 documents, 50,000 documents with break inheritance, you will see that it will block you. Okay. Can we check out documents? Yes, good. Can we email alert? Yes, good. Can we bookmark documents? Yes, good. Do we have version history? Yes. As the other ones, no problem. Do we have a life cycle? Yes and no. For life cycle, in fact, there is no out-of-the-box life cycle in SharePoint, but in fact, it's quite easy to rebuild one using properties mixed with a tiny workflow. Okay. Yes. We can archive. I just talked about it before, but I mean, just be careful about the norms you need to be compliant with. Can we restore a document if we delete a document by error? Yes, we can. Can we have a rendition on documents? It means, can we have, every time I publish a document, can I have a PDF version of the document? This is what the old DMS system do. You can, it's not easy to do something like that in SharePoint. You have something to convert doc to PDF, but it will be considered as a different document, so not a good option. But in fact, you have to understand why we were doing so before. We were doing so, I mean, converting PDF, doc to PDF, and so on. What we were doing so to be sure that the end user won't be able to modify the document. Okay, it was our way to ensure that the end user is not able to modify the document. It's no more a good idea. First, because in fact, using Word, you can modify PDF now. And second, using SharePoint, if you don't want your end user to be able to get the document and to be able to modify the document, what you can do is to set up the permissions. Instead of giving read permission, you give them something called view or view only, I don't remember, permission. And doing so, the end user is only able to read the document through its browser, his web browser. Okay, he won't be able to download the document anymore. So good for that. How are we able to have composite documents? What is a composite document? It's a document which in fact is several files at the same time. I was talking about a request for proposal. Usually a request for proposal can be, you can think it as being one document, but most of the time it's several files because you have annexes and so on. So to manage this kind of thing, we have document sets in SharePoint. This is a specific content type, which is not enabled by default, but which is very helpful for document management system. Can we search? Yes, definitely. And last point, can we build a workflow on SharePoint? Answer is yes, but a few years ago, a few years before, we had SharePoint Designer and InfoPath. You shouldn't look at, you should stop using SharePoint Designer and InfoPath. There is no new version of those tools. The support will end soon. So you should look at Power Automate and Power Apps to build your workflows. Okay, it's sufficient to build more or less tiny workflows, but if you need a real BPM, business process management system, something to have big workflows, which is connected to several sources within the company and so on, maybe you should look at a third-party solution like K2 or Nintex, okay, which are the most famous ones to build workflow based on Office 365 and SharePoint. Okay, so we are good about the SharePoint as a document management system. To go quick, storage. Where are my documents stored? You have several data centers in Australia. Good for you. If you are an international company, you may want to have a part of your documents in US and a part of your document in Europe, just to comply with the local law or regulations. Okay. So by default, when you build, when you create your tenant, everything will be, your tenant is attached to one single data center, one single region, in fact, and everything will be stored within this region. Okay, so for instance, in Australia. If you want to have something more complex, if you are an international company and you want to be able to have a site collection dedicated in US or in Europe or in Asia, for instance, you have an option called multi-geo capability. You have to have at least 500 end users, and you will have an extra cost for that. Okay, but doing so, you will be able to move a site collection or end user mailbox on another region, on another data center. Okay, but be careful. Once again, when you look at the SharePoint, the Microsoft documentation, or if you look at within your Office 365 administration, and you check that allocation, this is this is a screenshot for a French tenant. You'll see that, for instance, France, you will say, okay, Exchange, SharePoint, everything is in France or in Europe. So if you look at this, you may feel secure, and you may think that everything is in Europe. It's not so true. Okay, you can see at the bottom here two PowerShell commands, connect.-msol service, and the second one will give you the list of the servers. You will have the list of server names of your tenant. Okay, and if you check exactly what is what you have inside, you will see something slightly different from the Microsoft documentation. For instance, those are screen capture for a tenant in Singapore. Okay, and if you look at Stream, for instance, here it says that Stream is hosted in Singapore. But if I look at the name of the Stream server, I will see that it's ANA001. ANA is for North America, which means United States. So it's not in Singapore, even if the documentation says that it should be in Singapore. So if you want to be sure, check this command line. And if you have something different, contact the Microsoft support and ask them exactly what you can store and is it safe for you to store, for instance, to use stream if you need to use confidential data in stream, for instance. Okay. Usually for Exchange, SharePoint, and so on, it's always what they say in the documentation. But for instance, for stream or forms or Yammer, you will find that sometimes it's something different. I don't know for Australia. I don't have an Australian document. Encryption, quickly, when you store in Office 365, understand that in fact your document is not it's not stored in the SharePoint database anymore. In fact, it's split in several parts, and those parts are encrypted with one single key per file, and the encrypted file will be stored in Azure storage. Okay, and the address of the blob in Azure storage and the encryption keys are stored in SharePoint database. The Azure storage container and the SharePoint database are secure with other keys, which are stored in something called the key store. And this key store is ultra secure. Okay, so what you have to understand is that if someone sneak inside the Microsoft network, which never happened by now, as far as we know, to access your document, it would have to crack both the SharePoint content database, which is encrypted also, the Azure storage container, and the key store to access the document. So it's typically something that you don't want to try. And I will end with the compliance topic. So what you have to understand is that Microsoft complies with a lot of norms, including Australian and New Zealandian norms. Okay, if you want to know more about those norms and regulations, you have something called Microsoft Trust Center. Go over there, and you have access to plenty of documentation, audit reports, and so on, and certificates about those norms. Okay. What you have also to understand is what I was talking about, where your documents are stored, and in fact it's important because there's something in the US called the Patriot Act. Okay, because of Patriot Act, if your data are stored in the US, the Patriot Act will apply. Doing so, it means that all information agencies, US information agencies, have access to your documents, may have access to your document if they want to. It also means that if the US justice go after your company, they can access your document. You can't block this, okay? And it applies only if your documents are stored in US. Okay, if you are stored in Australia, for instance, it won't apply. But a few years ago, the Department of Justice tried to access documents. For instance, I remember it was a mailbox hosted in Ireland, and Microsoft blocked the request from the Department of Justice. It went to all the steps of American justice until the Supreme Court, and the conclusion of that is that Trump made something called the Cloud Act. I will talk in 1 minute. If you have data, personal data to store, and if those data are data about European citizens or about Californian citizens, you have to deal with GDPR and CCPA. And good news for you, Microsoft and Office 365 is compliant with GDPR and CCPA. And I come from France. We are very strict about GDPR, and I can assure you that it's okay. We have plenty of tools to learn about e-discovery, labels, DLP, RMS, and so on, to activate and to use to be compliant with GDPR. But it's okay. You can do something compliant with GDPR or CCPA using Office 365. And about the Cloud Act, and it will be my last topic. It's only if the US Justice is not information agencies. It's only if US Justice, if an attorney do a request about your company, and there are a few cases where a US company can have extraterritorial laws. It's when you deal with corruption, robbery, or if your company is doing business with a country under US embargo. Okay, and in those cases, yes, the Cloud Act can apply. Okay, and it can apply even if it's stored in Australia. So be careful about that. But if it happens, in fact, have to happen in very specific conditions. And I don't know the Australian law, but maybe you have something in the Australian laws, or maybe you have already an agreement about the Cloud Act with US. What you have to retain, if you look at the Office 365 general conditions, that if something happens, Microsoft will try to notify you. And I studied the figures for the request applied to French customers and European customers. And I made a comparison with Amazon and Google. And I can say that, in fact, Microsoft, from far, is protecting your data. Okay, you can, if you check the figures, you have only very, very, very few requests which go until the end, because Microsoft have a lot of attorneys and advocates and so on, and not attorneys, advocates, sorry, and lawyers in English. And doing so, they will try to protect your data, okay, even against the Cloud Act, but they comply with Cloud Act anyway. Okay. So thank you very much for your attentions. I will check if there are questions, but while there are questions, I will continue to display this QR code. You can win prizes if you try to run this this contest. And this session is the last session of the week, so I mean, this is the best moment to try to have to run the stuff. Okay, one question. How does SharePoint handle the disposal of document records like a traditional DMS, EDRMS? How do you destroy it under retention code in Australia, New Zealand? Okay, not sure to get everything about this question, but what you can use on SharePoint, you have two options. First, if you use classic classic sites, okay, not the modern sites, you can set up something on document type, on content types, or in document libraries, and it's called the information management. I don't remember. Anyway, you can set up something just by clicking, and you can say, for instance, equis years, 10 years after last document modifications, for instance, you will run a workflow, or you will delete the document, or you will move the document to the trash bin. Okay, you can do something like that. It's if you use classical sites. If you use modern sites, what you have to use is retention labels. Look, you can Google it, retention labels. And you can apply retention label by default on document libraries, or your end user will be able to apply retention label, or you can build a workflow to apply retention label to a document based on metadata, whatever. And you set up your retention label directly in the Office 365 admin. And okay, just to be clear, if you save something in SharePoint, is it saved in OneDrive too? No, it's the contrary, in fact. Beyond OneDrive, there is a SharePoint. Okay. If you go on OneDrive, you will have an option and you can search documents stored in SharePoint from OneDrive, but the document, even if when you store in OneDrive, in fact, will be beyond OneDrive, there is a SharePoint. Okay. It's not OneDrive which is beyond SharePoint, it's the contrary. Extra context. Governments are required to keep the metadata of the object and say they dispose it under legislation equus. Can that be achieved? Governments are required to keep the metadata of the object and say that they dispose it under okay. If you do something like that, so you need to keep the document. Okay, because for instance, it's something which happens very often in banking system, for instance. They want you to be sure you keep the document and you don't modify the document anymore. Okay, you have an option in SharePoint called in English, declare as record. Okay, it's not activated by default. You need to activate a feature for that. And when you activate such a feature, you will have an extra option in your document library and about declaring as record, and you can manually or by default declare as record. Once again, using workflow, you can declare as record. And when you declare a document as a record, you will see a little locker in the icon, okay? And you won't be able to modify the document anymore. Nobody can modify the document anymore, okay? Not even an admin. What the admin can do is to unlock the document, but if he does so and relog the document after, you will see that it modifies the locking date, okay? Because if you go in the option, you will find information about when the document has been logged, okay? So to comply about this, just Google something about document declare as record in SharePoint, and you will see the documentation about that. But definitely there is an option about that, which I don't know your legislation, but it's something that I think, as I understand your question, should be useful. Is there any other questions? Lorian, it's okay for you? Lorian? Okay. So if nobody has new questions, thank you very much for your attention. Sorry for my poor English. Thanks again for the sponsors. Thanks very much to Lorian, who was in fact managing everything for me in the background for this session. I will do another session in 2 weeks about security in Office 365. We will talk about how to hack Office 365 and how to secure your Office 365 tenant. I will try to cover the topic in 50 minutes. It's quite a challenge, but I will try to do it. So if you don't have any more questions, once again, I don't know who you are, Anonymous, but thank you very much for your comment. I wish you an excellent weekend, end of week, and see you soon. Thank you very much again. Bye-bye.